Hi everybody, welcome to Caketastic Cakes. It's Jen and I'm going to show you today how I made this Star Wars Mandalorian cake. And if you find this video helpful, please don't forget to like and subscribe because it does help me out. Alright, to begin with my cake, I wanted to show you this just because it's life and it happens. I was making a cannoli cake, okay? So I have my cannoli cake, there it is. I'm filling it with my cannoli filling. Everything is going lovely. I've got my little buttercream dams going because this cannoli filling's kind of soft and squishy. I'm putting my second layer on. There we go. Fill it up. No problem so far. And then I put my top on and I'm getting ready to stick it in the fridge. And I realized I totally forgot to add the chocolate chips, the mini chips, to each layer of the filling. So I had to pull my cake apart oh so carefully and add my chocolate chips and then put my poor little tears back together in order to get my cake back to what it should be. So I put the other one on, adding my other layer. Now I can put the top on. And I just wanted to show this to you guys because this kind of stuff happens and it's life and it's no big deal. It's not like, people who make these videos are perfect, and I definitely am not, but these things can be fixed. So if you ever do make a mistake, don't freak out. Just, take a minute to figure it out and what you need to do to fix it. And like I always say, when in doubt, cover it with a decoration. Okay, getting back to my cake. Now, I had it in the fridge for a while. I let it set and cool. That's why I wrapped it in plastic wrap. Buttercream iced it. Stuck it back in the fridge. Let it set up nice and chilly. And now I rolled out my fondant and I am covering my cake. I just rolled it out nice and thin, but not too thin because that's just how I go. I tend to make my fondant a little thicker. I'm smoothing down the sides, as you can see. I kind of pull out the bottom edge of the fondant like that and up, and then tuck my hand down into the little crease of it and smooth it down, and there you go. Now I'm using my fondant smoothing paddles for their actual reason for existing, and I'm smoothing my fondant with it using my pizza cutter, which is not its intended use, to trim off the extra fondant, but it works really well. Highly recommend it. Trim off all the extras, smooth down your edges once again, and now you got a good base for your cake going. Okay, so now we're going to start adding our little star spatter effect to it. I have some white food coloring there. It is not a Wilton brand. I don't remember what brand it is, but it's white, and I am using a flat paintbrush that I have, and I'm dipping just the edge of it into the white, and then I am using my fingernail to brush across the bristles and making it flick, flick, flick all over the cake. So I'm going it as heavy as I want, as thick as I want, So it's different thicknesses, different spatters. It's all over the place. And when you're happy with it, clean off your cake plate. Don't let it dry because then it becomes harder to get off. And then put it back in the fridge. Not too hard, right? And it gets you a nice starry sky effect. Now I went online and just found the word Star Wars and printed it out. I printed it out in a nice size I thought would work well with the cake. I cut out my letters, but when I cut them out, I cut them out carefully so that the white paper, I cut out the black letters so the white paper is still intact. Because I'm going to use it for a template to measure where all my letters are going to be when I put them on the cake. So you'll see that in a moment. So even though you don't necessarily need to see me trim out all these letters, it's just a little helpful tip that I found is actually very helpful when you need something spaced properly for the good effect of it. And for the Star Wars word itself, you really do need it to look right or it's going to look wrong. Makes sense, right? So yeah, all I did was roll out this is gum paste I'm using right now. So the black was fondant to cover the cake. This is gum paste. And I just rolled it out pretty thin, and I'm using a nice gold color. And I'm just tracing out my letters as carefully as I can with my X-Acto knife there. And just putting them to the side. I'm working a little bit quickly because I don't want them to dry too much. If they do dry too much, then they won't form to the cake properly. They'll be kind of stiff. So I do want them to flex a little bit. Okay, this is what I was talking about before when I said I cut out the black letters and left the white in the center of the two words intact. So I could use it as a map, basically, to place my lettering. So that's what I'm doing. I'm holding up my letters. I have the white paper on the cake where I think it'll look good. And then I am just going one letter at a time and just very carefully placing it, making sure it sticks and it's not a little crooked because, my method isn't 100% perfect. It's only like 94% perfect. So again, just map it out nice and carefully. Put your words into place or your letters into place, and you see how it's able to flex around the cake. It's not just sticking out stiff. That's what I was saying before too, that I wanted to move kind of quickly so that it doesn't become too stiff, because otherwise you end up with cracks in it and stuff if you try to bend it, and it could break it completely. Just doesn't look good. So yes, take your time, map out your letters, and when you're all done, you're going to have a perfectly arranged Star Wars words on your cake. Very nice, right? Stick it in the fridge, and now we're moving on. I'm going to show you how to make the Mandalorian's helmet now. So you're going to want to make this and the Yoda decoration at least a day before so they have time to dry. And I made these out of gum paste and not fondant. What you saw, that little metal thing I covered with a piece of paper towel, it goes in the center of my large cake pans to help them bake. And I use it all the time to give structure and yet keep things hollow so it weighs less when I make them. And anyway, now I have taken gray gum paste. This is gum paste because I want it to set up and hold its shape. I shaped it over, as you see, that little metal thing that I have to make kind of a dome. And I tried to make it as round as I could on 3 sides and kind of come out a little bit in the front there. I put a rectangle of black gum paste that you see me patting into place there across the front. And you want it to go wide enough that it goes around onto the sides as well of the helmet. I'm cutting out a square of more of the gray gum paste here, and this is just going to be kind of like my starting point. I'm going to keep holding it up and referencing the size of it. I'm going to make kind of like an L shape out of it, and that's going to become part of his mask. You only want it to go about 3/4 of the way up. You don't want it to go all the way up. Now you see the part that goes up and down in the center, it has that little niche, cut out at the bottom. And then straight up the side, straight across, and then I use the circle cutter that you saw. You're going to see me do it again in a second to just kind of round out the shape of it. I took the one that I made because I did like it. I tweaked it a little bit just to make sure it fit, but I flipped it over on some more gum paste and just used it as a template. It's just an easy, simple way to make things a little more symmetrical. There's my circle cutter again to just get that little round off shape in the center there. Now I've got a right and a left side. I can put them together. Just make sure you leave a little space in the center so that the black shows through, kind of like a letter T, I guess you'd say, by the time we're all said and done. And yeah, you're good to go. Now, this piece is going to be kind of, I'm going to call them the cheek pieces because I don't know what else you're going to call it. I rolled it, as you saw right there, with my rolling pin on either side. So now I have kind of a hump in the center. You're going to see it many times. It goes thicker in the center and kind of points out. That's just the shape that's in the helmet. So I was trying to replicate it, and that's the way I came up with. I have it up in place. I'm just measuring it out. The top corner, that little cut that I just made right there, is going to go all the way to meet that top L shape that we put into place already. The bottom piece is going to come down and curve around, but it is not going to meet the bottom anywhere. So you're going to have an opening that starts at the bottom and then tapers off and disappears into the top corner because they're going to come together. The gray pieces will come together again. Now, once again, I use the rolling pin to roll the 2 sides like that and that. So I have the ridge in the center. I kind of pinch it a little to make it, sharp if I need to. And now I'm using the first piece again to make a template. So I'm getting the height and the width of each side, and I just match up the ridges so that I know which way to go with everything. And they should be pretty close to the same size. I am not perfect when it comes to this, but it's not too far off. It definitely gives you a very good start. All right, now I've got my second one that mirrors the first. So you want to put them together a little bit off. So I match up the ridges, and I can see that the one is a little bit bigger because it just always is that way for some reason. So trim off any extra. Peel them apart carefully so you don't wreck them. And then you have 2 matching cheek pieces. That top corner, as you see, goes up to meet the L that we made earlier. And then the bottom, again, it drops straight down at an angle from the top, hits that ridge that I left in there, and then just curves around and down to the bottom. Put the other side on too. There you go. And right now I've got everything going up to the edge of the black visor color, I'm going to call it. So that's kind of like my map, my matching points that I work from. Now this straight long rectangle that I rolled out, It's a little bit on the thicker side, I want to say. I use my knife blade to make an impression down the length of it toward the top, so maybe like 3/4 toward one side, and wrap it around, and that's I don't know, the headband part of the helmet. That's what I'm calling that part, the headband part of the helmet. And again, a little bit of water puts everything in place, and yeah, just moving on. Now I'm going to get to the side. I'm going to call them the earpieces now. I'm just making up names for the parts of the helmet. Okay, so I just have a plain old rectangle, nice and easy. See, match it up to the bottom. You want it to go as high as the gray L shape that we made from before. And then I'm going to make a couple little pieces here. You see, they're just little rectangles. They're fatter. They're thicker than the original ones that are already on the helmet. I don't know what the parts are, but they look all kind of mechanical or something. They have some designs in them. So I'm trying to just give that idea too, that it's got some designs. It has some importance or purpose or something. So I'm putting some lines. I'm just rolling it in my hand on the knife blade to make some lines and making some imprints. I'm going to use my little swizzle straw to make a little circle, my Dunkin' Donut straw to make a bigger circle, put a couple lines in it again just to decorate it, to make it look busy, make it look a little more mechanical. And when I put it into place, the headband is in the way, so I'm just going to trim it away. Be careful when you do this to make sure you match it up as well as you can, because you don't want a big gap because you just mismeasured or anything. And then add some water and stick it into place. Same thing on the other side. Cut away the extra, put it into place, press it in, tuck in your edges. There you go. All right, one little final detail here. Like, it's not hard. This really isn't bad to make. It really isn't. I'm going to do the piece that goes across the top of the head. So another long, thin strip. I'm going to use my knife blade again to make 2 lines running down each side. Meet in the middle. You got to tip the corners off of the front and the back, just like nip them off. Lay it over and center it. There you go. Mandalorian helmet. Now to begin our baby. I'm just going to call him Baby Yoda because it's just easier, even though I know his name now is Grogu. I'm just going to stick with Yoda because I think it's a little easier. Okay, now I'm going to begin with his coat. So I started with some very beige kind of colored gum paste, and this is gum paste, not fondant. And I shaped it kind of into a loose, sloppy cone. I stuck a lollipop stick down the center and pressed some marks in the sides just to kind of make some ridges kind of in his coat, because it's very wrinkly. It doesn't fit him quite appropriately. These are going to be sleeves, his sleeves. They are big and chunky, as you can see, because his little coat doesn't seem to fit him properly. I don't know. I felt like it was also too tapered at the top, because if you look at him, he's pretty much, straight up and down on the sides. It doesn't taper the way I had it. So I cut off a bunch of it in order to make it look that way. So it's more straight up and down on the sides. So don't make the cone size, the cone shape, even though I showed it to you. I have a little strip that you see me doing right up the center. I put some marks in it to make it look like stitching. And now I'm going to do, I don't know, underneath his arms on either side of his coat and the underside of his sleeves, he's got kind of like little furry patches on the material. So that's what I'm making. I'm cutting out some circles, and I'm using my tool there that makes the stitching pattern, and I'm just kind of just cross-hatching all over it, just back and forth, zigzags, just roughing it all up to make it look more textured. I'm putting a circle on either side, and then I'm coming back to his sleeves again. I just rolled it out so it was kind of thick. I'm trying to flatten off the edge a little bit, so I'm just pinching it between my fingers to make sure they're the same size. That's always good. And then I'm cutting the tops at a pretty sharp angle, and the sleeves are not long. Like, he's not long. He's all torso and ears, basically. So I am doing some more of the little cross-hatching stuff as I did before. I used a smaller circle this time, and I kind of cut it in half. I want it to be on the underside of his sleeves, because if you look at his coat closely, you can kind of see where the pattern goes up on the sides and then up under the sleeves as well. So that's what I'm trying to emulate here with that. And when you put it together, they match up, so then it's like, oh yeah, look, it worked out okay. Not too shabby. Now I didn't do much else with the coat. As you can see, it's just kind of sitting there. I'm moving on to his head. I start out with a ball of light green gum paste, and I'm pinching off the 2 ends, kind of pulling them out, trying to be real careful because my fingernails will definitely leave marks in it if I'm not careful. And I'm just pulling very gently, stretching and working the gum paste out to the side to make his ears. I'm using that tool there to kind of hollow into the side of his head a little bit. And I'm going along the top but I'm leaving it as a ridge at the top. So it's got like a big ridge at the top, smaller ridge at the bottom, and then pressing into the head. You see, so I'm kind of like using my thumb to press against when I'm doing the top of the ear. I'm just very carefully pulling because you can tear gum paste. Gum paste is not all that stretchy. So work it. I'm kind of separating out the top of the ear from the head. Again, just keep pulling it out and working it out gently, nice and patiently. You don't want it to get too thin. I'm folding in the little section in the front there. See, I'm kind of pushing from the bottom and then press it to kind of fold over the ear a little bit. It's hard to explain, but you can see what I'm doing, hopefully. So I'm just trying to separate the ears. So now I've got more of a round head with the two giant ears attached. And you got to make sure you have giant ears because he has giant ears. I perhaps made his head and his ears too big compared to the coat that I made. I'd recommend if you do this to make his head smaller in proportion, because I feel like looking back at the finished product, I think it might have been too big. I'm still happy with it, but you know, it could always be better, right? So now I'm using my ball tool to hollow out two big old gouges in his head because he has enormous dark eyes. I'm doing a little cheat here and just going with black gum paste, just straight up black. So I'm filling in the entire sockets with black. You don't have to. You could use dark brown and make an iris and then black if you want. I'm using my tool once again to just kind of press down above each eye to kind of give him more of a eyebrow ridge. If you work it quickly enough, like my gum paste was kind of drying out because it's been pretty chilly where I am, so I've had the heat on, so it dries out the air really quick. It makes it a little harder to work sometimes. But if you are able to, you can press down and create kind of like little eyelids as well. Just press down over top of your eyes. I wasn't able to do that. So he's very wide-eyed and at attention, but he's got those ridges above his eyebrows. And you can see I just keep adding more ridges. I'm doing on the sides, around his eye. I'm going to go straight down the center. There you can really see the ridges. Couple little pressures on either side. I'm going on either side of where his nose will be. And I'm going underneath his eyes to the side again. So his eyes are kind of buggy, but that's okay. I'm just using a little ball of gum paste for his nose. And then I'm going to use my veining tool there to poke a couple little nostrils. And there you go. That's it. So he's got his eyes, he's got his head ridges, and he's got his nose and face cheek ridges. He's very wrinkly for being such a little guy. I'm making him a little bit more on the happy side, so I just use my veining tool again just to press a line across. Yeah, like I said, it's not the best. I've never made him before. I was happy with him, but I feel like once you know, the first one's always the roughest. So yeah, make his head a little smaller, make his ears more narrow and long rather than as wide as mine are, and it'll be perfect. I'm using some pink shimmer, just some pink shimmer dust to put a little pink in his ears. Because I thought, why not, right? Maybe it'll look cute. I'm using some green shimmer to go over some of the wrinkles in his head, and I'm not adding any color, or excuse me, any liquid to it. I'm just dusting it on, if you will. There's no painting it on here. So I'm going over all his ridges. I'm going kind of on the outline of his ears a little bit, and it just gives him a little bit more shadowing, a little bit more depth and color. Some of it, like that, is too dark, and if you go too dark, just rub it. And then it comes off, and if it really is stubborn, get a damp paper towel and rub that, and that'll take it right off. So you really can't go wrong here. It's pretty safe to use. I'm adding a few more wrinkles to his coat in his sleeves, as you saw. And now this big piece I rolled out is going to become his collar. So I'm cutting the one end at an angle, as you saw, pretty sharp, and the other one's cut at a smaller angle to go kind of downward. And I want it to be big and thick and poofy because that's kind of how his coat is. And now I'm using that same tool before to make the stitching pattern, and I'm cross-hatching all over the place, and I'm zigzagging and up and downing. And I edited it out a lot because it was literally minutes of me doing this and then getting frustrated because everywhere I held it, I would end up smoothing it out by squeezing it a little too tight. So anyway, once you get it roughed up enough, and if you don't have that tool, it's no big deal. You could use one of the tips, like a piping tip, if you have a rough piping tip, like one of the star tips maybe, and just kind of, you know, poke it all up, rough it up that way. Lots of ways you can cheat on this if you need to. Anyway, once you're happy with it, put it in place, and you can see how it'll sit. Like, ah, isn't that cute? Okay, Now we're going to keep going with his coat. I'm going to add the bottom ruff of his coat now. I'm going to do the exact same thing as I did for the collar. So I rolled it out. This is going to be thinner because it's not quite as big. It's going to be thinner. I set my little coat on top just to kind of measure it out, trim off the extra, stick the pieces together at the end with a little bit of water, which I didn't show you, but I think you can handle that. Rough it all up however you need to do it. Add some more water and then set the coat right on top, and now you have the little ruffly fur trim at the bottom of his jacket. Okay, yeah, that's it. And I'm also working on a paper towel now, so it'll be easy to move around. Now I'm going to add the ruffled trim to the sleeves. Same thing as before, I just rolled it smaller and smaller as we're going, and rough it up. If you end up messing it up by pressing too hard, which I kind of did, just add a little bit more to it right on there. And now this is pretty much the final touch here. I'm taking brown food coloring and a little bit of water and a big old paintbrush, which I love. I love this paintbrush. It's fun to use. And I am just painting the jacket. And I'm allowing the dark food coloring to get into all the little cracks and all the little ruffles I made and all the little cross hatchings I made. And I'm going to paint all over it. I'm focusing mainly on the collar, the ruffles, and the trim, and all the wrinkles I put into it. But I'm going to end up going back over all of it with just water in my paintbrush. I don't clean it out necessarily, but it's going to kind of lighten it up and balance it out and smooth it out. Don't forget to do the back. Don't forget to do underneath the collar and underneath the sleeves, all those little spots that I realized I missed and had to go back for. Like you can see right there, I'm like, oh, I gotta go under that sleeve. Yes, so do all over it. When you're done with it, like I said, I went over it with just some water just to kind of even it out a bit. And then I'll plop the head on, and yeah, baby Yoda, looking good. All right, we're not done yet, okay? And don't worry about how shiny the jacket is right now either, because of the nature of the game here. It's going to dry, and when it does, it won't be so glossy. It'll retain all the color and everything. It'll be much more matted. I made 3 little, I don't know, what do you want to call them? Little cones, little spikes of gum paste there. And those are going to be his little fingers, because I think it's so cute when they stick out from his sleeve, because it's just a little baby hand sticking out his big old sleeve, and it's so cute. So I'm making the 3 little pieces. I have his little fingers peeking out, and I happen to have a big silver bead, a candy bead, that I'm putting in his one hand, because if you've watched The Mandalorian, you know about the silver ball. And so I decided I was going to try to incorporate that as best I could. I could have made it bigger, honestly, because it kind of gets lost in his sleeve. You don't really see it too well there. But it's there, and anyone who watches the show will be like, oh, there it is, that's so cool. Anyway, now I'm painting a little bit of black food coloring right onto his eyes to make them shiny. No water or anything mixed in, just straight up food coloring, so that way it'll maintain its shine. And when they're hard, put them on top of your cake, and you got a really cool Star Wars Mandalorian cake. So I hope you found this video helpful. Again, please like and subscribe because it does help me out. Check out my other videos. I got a bunch out there. And as always, thank you for watching Caketastic Cakes.